The dust rose first, a low brown cloud crawling across the plains like a living thing, stirred by hooves and desperation. The land out here didn't care about reasons or regrets. It swallowed both the same. The sun burned hard above the New Mexico frontier, bleaching the sky, white and flattening the horizon, until the world felt endless and cruel. Somewhere in that dust storm rode a man who believed he was doing what had to be done. Jonah Cade hadn't planned on dragging a woman behind his horse that morning. He'd ridden out before dawn from his ranch, the boards of the corral still creaking from the night wind, his coffee half drunk and bitter in his gut. Trouble had a way of finding him lately. Lost cattle, cut fences, shadows moving where they shouldn't. The Apache raids had stopped months ago, but fear lingered longer than blood. Men in town talked themselves into anger, and anger made monsters out of ordinary folk. When Jonah found her near the dry wash, wounded and half-conscious, everything changed. She lay among the rocks like she'd fallen from the sky. Blood darkened the dirt beneath her shoulder, and her braid had come loose. Black hair streaked with dust and sweat. A rifle lay snapped beside her, broken clean at the stock. Apache. The word landed heavy in Jonah's chest, thick with the weight of a dozen old stories he'd never fully believed. He should have turned around. Instead, he dismounted, slow and careful, hand resting near his revolver, but not touching it. The woman's eyes snapped open, sharp and black, filled with a kind of fury that came from pain, mixed with survival. She reached for a knife that wasn't there, her breath coming ragged. "Easy," Jonah said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to, her or himself. She tried to rise and collapsed again, teeth bared like a cornered animal. Jonah swore under his breath. Leaving her meant death. Helping her meant inviting hell onto his land. Either way, the plains watched in silence, unmoved. The decision wasn't heroic. It was stubborn. He bound her wounds with his own shirt, ignoring the way she flinched, ignoring the way her gaze never left his throat. She didn't thank him. She didn't beg. When he lifted her onto his horse, she fought until the strength ran out of her, then went still, eyes burning with hate. He tied her wrists, not cruelly, but firmly, and led the horse back toward the ranch. From a distance, it would look like capture. From her perspective, it probably was. By the time they reached the Cade Ranch, the sun was sinking, bleeding red into the hills. Jonah's ranch wasn't much. Weather-beaten house, wide porch, a barn that leaned just a little too far east, but it stood solid against the wind. He carried her inside, laid her on his bed, and stepped back like he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. She woke that night screaming, not words, not language, just raw sound, ripped from somewhere deep and ancient. Jonah came running, lantern swinging, heart pounding. She thrashed against the ropes, sweat soaking the sheets, eyes unfocused. "You're safe," he said, though the lie tasted like dust. Her gaze snapped to him, and this time it was clear. She spoke in Apache, fast and furious, voice cracking with rage and fear. Jonah didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning: kidnapper, enemy, rancher, cowboy, all the same. Outside, hooves thundered. Jonah froze. 3 riders circled the ranch, shadows flickering against the walls. He killed the lantern and pressed himself to the window, rifle in hand. Cowboys, local men, not Apache. He recognized one of them. Silas Crow, trouble wearing a grin. "We heard you picked up something on the plains," Silas called. "Something that don't belong to you." The woman on the bed went still, listening. Jonah felt the weight of the moment press down on him like the sky itself. If he handed her over, no one would question it. If he didn't, he'd make enemies he couldn't outrun. She met his eyes across the dark room. For the first time, there was something other than hate there. Jonah stepped onto the porch, rifle low but visible. "Ain't your business, Crow," he said. Crow smiled wider. That smile promised blood. The plains held their breath. Morning came slow and hard. The kind that dragged itself over the plains like it. Didn't much care who survived the night. Pale light leaked through the cracks in the shutters, settling on dust motes that hung in the air like suspended gun smoke. Jonah Cade hadn't slept. He sat in a chair by the bed, rifle across his knees, eyes burning, listening to every sound the ranch made as it woke. The woman was awake. She lay still now, far too still, watching him from beneath heavy lashes. Her face was drawn tight with pain, but her gaze was sharp, measuring. Gone was the wild thrashing of the night before. This was something else, calculation, endurance. Jonah cleared his throat. He realized with a start that he didn't know what to call her. "You hurt bad," he said. "I got water. Food, too, if you can keep it down." She didn't answer. Instead, she tested the rope at her wrists, slow, deliberate. When it didn't give, her eyes flicked back to his, accusing. "I ain't gonna hurt you," Jonah said. "Not unless you give me reason." That earned him a sound halfway between a laugh and a scoff. She spoke then, carefully. Each word shaped with effort, thickly accented but clear enough to land like a bullet. "You already did." Jonah stiffened. "You speak English." "Some," she said. "Enough." Her voice was low, roughened by thirst and rage. It carried something else, too. Pride. He'd known Apaches who spoke English before, traders, scouts, but hearing it now felt like a shift in the ground beneath his boots. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, eyes narrowing. Finally, "Naya." Jonah nodded once. "I'm Jonah Cade. This is my ranch." She glanced around the room, taking in the simple furniture, the rifle rack, the scars in the floorboards from old spurs and boots. Her lip curled. "You tied me like an animal," she said. "I kept you alive," he replied. "And I kept you from riding straight into worse hands than mine." Her jaw tightened. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose tin on the barn roof. Jonah poured water into a tin cup and held it near her lips. She stared at it for a long moment before drinking, slow and careful, never breaking eye contact. "Why didn't you kill me?" she asked. Jonah thought of Silas Crow's smile in the dark, thought of the stories men told to justify their cruelty. "Because I'm not that man," he said finally. She studied him like she was deciding whether that was true. The ranch didn't stay quiet for long. By midday, Jonah spotted riders again, this time from the house. Dust plumes crawling across the horizon. He cursed softly. Word traveled fast in frontier towns, especially when fear and hatred did the carrying. He left Naya with a knife on the table within reach, not for her, but as a sign of trust, and stepped out onto the porch. 5 men rode in, hard faces under wide hats. Silas Crow rode at the front. "You got some nerve," Crow said, dismounting. "Army patrol passed through town this morning. Heard tell you're harboring an Apache woman." Jonah kept his voice level. "Heard wrong." Crow chuckled. "Funny thing about rumors. They tend to stick." One of the men spat in the dirt. "You know what her people did last winter? Burned farms, killed kids." Jonah felt something cold settle in his chest. "And you know what your people did," he said quietly. "But you don't hear me calling for rope." Crow's smile vanished. He stepped closer. "You think you're better than us?" "No," Jonah said. "I think I'm responsible for what happens on my land." A tense silence stretched between them. Inside the house, Naya listened, every muscle coiled. She could hear the hate in their voices, even when she couldn't catch every word. Crow leaned in, breath sour with whiskey. "Turn her over, tonight, or we come back and we won't be asking." When they rode away, the dust lingered like a threat. Jonah went back inside to find Naya sitting up, knife in hand. She didn't point it at him. She just held it steady. "They will kill me," she said. "Yes," Jonah said, "they will." She swallowed. "Then why keep me?" Jonah hesitated. "Because if I don't, I'll be just like them." That answer seemed to surprise her. Something shifted behind her eyes, subtle as a shadow crossing sun-baked ground. They talked as the day wore on, cautiously at first. Naya told him of a skirmish gone wrong, of soldiers who fired first and asked nothing, of being left for dead when the horses scattered. Jonah told her about his wife, buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, killed by fever, not violence. Pain recognized pain. As dusk fell, Naya stood for the first time, unsteady but determined. She walked to the window, looking out at the open land. "You are not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," Jonah replied. The admission hung between them, dangerous and intimate. That night, as the coyotes began their song, and the ranch settled into uneasy sleep, Jonah knew the choice he'd made could no longer be undone. And somewhere beyond the hills, Silas Crow sharpened his resolve.